Welcome to the live Money Guy Q&A session. Go ahead and get your questions coming into us and we'll jump right into it. To go ahead and prime the pump, we had Daniel. He brought this. FTE Daniel, his goal was to find an article that could kind of spur some conversations, let us discuss some things that we deal with financial planning clients, and I thought he found a doozy. So let me jump into this. I'm just going to read the question. This is from the Washington Post. There's a columnist, Carol Hacks, that a person wrote in, and this is called, here's the question: my grandfather's secret. My grandfather died last year, and my grandmother was really broken up at first, but something came to light that changed her feelings. I feel like we need sound effects
I'm about
to go
to say,
with this.
can we play the background music?
After my grandfather retired, he insisted that he and my grandmom live real frugally.
Okay.
They ate mainly beans and rice, canned vegetables.
Okay.
This sounds like the Bohansen household. That kind of thing, so my mom and dad tried to treat them whenever they could to some meat, or even a dinner out when they could afford it. Also, the house was always cold in the winter. Sounds like Bohansen.
I can respect that.
So my mom made them quilts and bought my grandmom a space heater, which my grandfather let her run. That does not sound like either one of our households. Grandfather let her run a couple of hours a day in the winter. They couldn't visit her sisters and brother because it was too expensive, and that really bothered my grandma because she even missed their funerals. We were the only family near her, and my mom, dad, and me all tried to make it up to her. After my grandfather died, we found out they were worth over $1 million. My grandma was so hurt and angry to realize she had been essentially living in poverty, taking things from my daughter's family when they could have had the best of everything and been giving to us all along. I don't think my grandfather was being mean. I think he was just scared of running out of money. My grandma now hates the memory of him and says she's glad he died. This has my mom so torn up she cries after visiting her mom. My grandmama is also spending money pretty wildly. Her house is like a sauna, and she has steak and shrimp all the time and wants to buy me a car. First question. I think that's funny. This is the first question. Is it okay if I take the car? And second, how can I help her get over being mad so she can mourn my grandfather who wasn't really a bad guy?
Yeah, this is sad. I mean, it's easy to kind of laugh at this and pull out the funny piece, but it really is kind of sad when you think about this couple who I'm assuming was married for a long time, and the memory, because of not having an open and honest conversation about finances, the memory's almost tainted, and even said that grandma was like happy grandma was gone and grandpa's gone and hated the memory. That kind of breaks your heart a little bit.
It does. I mean, this is the legacy I explain to people sometimes when we're doing estate planning as well as other financial planning matters that will carry on. It is your legacy, is don't keep it simple. I mean, that's the first thing. Keep it simple. But then also, you have to understand. So I wanted to put together a few steps on what overcomes the fear of not having enough. Because I think once you get a saver's mentality, there can be too much of a good thing if you're not careful. So let's first go through this, because I wrote down a few quick notes. A plan supported by an analytics is going to be your first step of success, because let's talk about pay yourself first.
Okay.
We talk about this all the time. It really is. There's so many value and benefits to paying yourself first. You get tax deductions if you're funding retirement accounts. You also are giving compounding interest the most opportunity to grow for you. And we want you to get to the 20 to 25% savings as fast as possible.
Right.
And that's not just to turn you into a miser. It's also to free you. Because if you know you're paying yourself first at 20 to 25%, from that point forward, past that, go live life. I mean, that's what this is supposed to do, is to free you, paying yourself first, and then making sure you're building some capacity in there for travel, enjoying friends and relatives, because that's also important. And then number two is, you got to know what creates happiness. The saddest part of this entire question that was asked was that the family was not allowed to visit relatives, was not allowed to go to funerals. There were lots of lost memories in there. So here's the thing. We've done several shows on happiness, money, fulfillment. How are they all connected and related to each other? And we had 4 rules of what actually creates happiness. Now, we know everybody hears the $75,000. $75,000 does create not fulfillment, but it does create the happiness that you can cover basic necessities.
Covered.
So, but number one is focus on experiences rather than things. Number two is underindulge, but I think that Grandpa here
took that one to the extreme.
When you're doing beans, rice, and vegetables and no travel, that's not underindulging. That's not bedazzling your basic life. That's being a miser, an Ebenezer Scrooge. So this guy took it to an extreme. But number three is he missed this. Spend on someone else. There's a lot of value to that. And then number four, one of the keys to happiness and fulfillment is faith, family, community, and work. And a lot of that has to do with, do you wake up and feel like you are making the world a better place, focusing on relationships, creating memories? All these things are really important. And then that led to the third thing, which is, guys, let analytics drive your decision making. Just like we told you 20 to 25% is an important savings goal. As you approach retirement, you should start stress testing.
Sure.
One of the most powerful things we do for clients, yes, we have to tell clients you have to slow down the spending, you have to control, you have to restrict, you have to be disciplined. But one of my favorite things with savers is we actually get to relieve them of the stress. Do they have enough? By stress testing, creating a plan of action, and actually telling them, hey, go spend more money on the grandkids. Sure. Go travel more. Go visit those relatives. It sounds like Grandpa had no plan. Maybe he came from the Depression era, and he just felt like, I'm going to go broke, so I've got to save, without putting any analytics behind it. And that made him kind of a ship with no rudder in the back, and then not having, any type of navigation to know where he was actually working towards.
So it's sad that he didn't feel like he could talk with Grandma about these things. So you're saying perhaps he should have had an unbiased third party come in and say, hey, Grandpa, it's okay to turn on the heat. It's okay to not buy the beanie weenies.
Well, and any marriage, communication's so important. Sure. Having open discussions. I mean, if you want to go back, I always bring this back to Money Guy shows. We have had several shows where we had marriage episodes where it cracked me up is that you thought you were going to have financial discussions on the plane ride after the marriage, on the honeymoon, to talk about finances.
That's the way it was supposed to go.
That's very noble, and obviously Grandpa would have been a lot better off, maybe not on the honeymoon, but definitely at some point bringing Grandma into the discussions, having an open book policy of understanding what's going on, because this doesn't only extend to your spouse. I'm telling you, once you guys get to a level of success and you're actually in retirement and you're starting to age and you have adult children, bring them into the communication plan too, so there's not some misunderstanding, because we know the stats. First generation makes it. We know from even our own research, 77% of our clients actually are first generation. But the stat that breaks my heart is 70% of those families will lose it in second generation. 90% will lose it in the third generation, because the kids and grandkids will have no problem spending your money. So you might as well have an open communication plan so you can enjoy this stuff while you're alive, but also help equip and prepare your relatives so they don't make mistakes with how you handle money.
Love it. Awesome. So, hey, what do you say? Let's answer some questions. How's that sound?
That sounds like a great jump in.
So I'm going to jump in. This is a question from Bob, and actually this question's been echoed a few times. So this is what Bob says. Question: what is the best way to get people I care about on board with getting out of debt, having a bigger picture mindset, and working towards becoming a millionaire? And then Chantel, she even added to that. She said, how do you keep the flame of those folks from dying out? How do you help them rekindle it once they've started and are beginning to go backwards?
Trying to work on my Barry White voice there. When you start talking, filling the flame, making things work. But
I had no idea where he was going with that.
It is one of those things. The first easy, low-lying fruit answer is that I want you, if you want to get your family excited about talking about money, the easiest answer out there is talk about the Money Guy Show like you would CrossFit or Teslas with them as much and as frequently as possible, so that some of this will catch on and catch fire. What do you think of that answer?
I think it's great. It's interesting you threw out CrossFit. I feel attacked right there, but I appreciate that you threw out Tesla.
I self-deprecate with Tesla too. But it is. I want you to get so energized thinking about. I think you do have to be careful. Anybody who has teenagers knows one of the worst things you can do if you want to persuade or move people in a certain direction is all of a sudden start telling people what they should do. Because teenagers and humans, and adults, by the way, they're humans too, but they're no different than teenagers. That when you felt like somebody is clubbing you over the head of what you should do, you have a tendency to go in the opposite direction. So I would actually create an environment of letting them know, hey, you take finances seriously. You're paying attention, you're educating yourself, and that has created a level of wisdom that when people, they will notice that and they'll come to you and you share the resources. Seriously, start telling them some books. Maybe even give some books away at Christmas. I mean,
I think one of the things that you did really, really interesting, Brian, is you had a group of friends back when you first started managing money. And after you read The Wealthy Barber by David Chilton, you decided you were going to go buy that book for all of your buddies. And you actually gave it to them. A lot of them read it, and it actually spurred them to go open their very first Roth IRAs, right? Like that is actually, that's some a real world thing that happened. That was how you were able to influence maybe guys who might not have been otherwise had the affinity to go make financial decisions, start making financial decisions.
What's interesting is that now, and I'll get to the second part, is how do you keep the flame alive? But I just got back from spring training down in Florida with my high school buddies, and it's been years since we've all gotten together. And one of them, while we were in between innings, did lean over and goes, hey, you know that those IRA accounts we set up when we were like in our 20s? He goes, those things have done really well. I mean, one of them is over 6 figures now. And I was like, yeah, this whole thing works. I mean, it really is. So I feel like I planted seeds with some of my younger, well, I was young too, but my friends, because I told them, I always had the statement of, hey, I don't want to retire and be alone. I'm going to go ahead and plant seeds now so your trees will be just as big as my trees and we can do this together. But when you want to keep the flame alive, that's one of the things I do. I will tell you that there's an excitement to this, but it can kind of start fading if you're not creating behaviors that will keep you on track. Do the annual net worth statement so that way you have reinforcement of what is working, what's not working, but also getting the affirmation of successful behavior habits. Also, make sure you're having those, what I call them, travel date nights or financial date nights where you're going over what your goals for the year are with your significant other or spouse, where you are discussing the net worth, but also travel plans and goals. All those things are going to help keep this thing front and center, but also let you work on the business of your finances and not just get lost in the messy middle of life.
Yeah, I think one of the big things that I'm able to do when I talk to young folks is you do have to somehow make it relatable, somehow make it exciting. You know, we talk about this whole 88 times over concept. Whenever I talk to someone who's in their 20s, I talk to them about 88 times over and just showing them how a little bit can do so much for them later on. Well, then as you age and you get into your 30s and 40s, then I start talking about the money multiplier.
Yeah.
If you don't know what that is, go to the moneyguy.com website, click on resources, go check out our wealth multiplier deliverable, because then you show somebody who has been saving through their 20s and now maybe they've got $10, $20, $50, $100,000 saved up, and you show them what that can turn into by the time that they get to retirement. It gets really exciting, and it starts to feel very, very tangible when they can see the fruits of their labor. So continue to drive that conversation home, I think, is one of the ways that I'm able to connect with younger folks.
Great question, though. You actually combined 2 questions there. I like that.
Well, I'll do what I can. All right, so let's know. This is from Tim. Tim said, hey, guys, what is the net worth tipping point for choosing a will versus a trust? No special caveats in this case, i.e. no special needs child, no disabled spouse, none of that. What's the net worth to know if I need a will or a trust?
We've done a lot of shows on estate planning, life insurance, all the things that are kind of the nuances of planning for end-of-life type stuff. Because let's face it, no matter how healthy we are, some point not going to be above ground here on Earth. So it is definitely important topics. I have a story I want to share. You know, this is to keep it in priority is because I think you do have to be careful, because I think the real question is how complex do you go, and how do you know when to go more complex with your estate planning? And I've seen some doozies out there. I had a client that came in west side of the country where they'd gone to a seminar attorney, and they had so many LLCs and organizations set up for jet skis, it was just kind of 4-wheelers. I mean, it was like it was just complex beyond complex.
And it was an estate plan that would have made a lot of sense for someone with a net worth of $50 to $100 million with very, very unique circumstances and a very illiquid estate. It was not the estate plan designed for this family.
Yeah, it was. You could tell a seminar attorney had gotten a hold of them and just ran them through the boilerplate of giving them the folder with all the different structures. And what I thought was interesting, though, is because I've been on the other side of it, is that when you leave a legacy of complexity for the sake of just being complex, not because it was necessary, you really leave a legacy of trouble for your heirs, because they are the ones that have to work with the attorneys, the accountants, file the taxes. So my biggest desire for when I'm helping clients with estate planning or end-of-life decisions is, what are your goals and desires, and what is the simplest, most effective way to do it? I had this exact same conversation yesterday with a client because they are still unwinding the complexity of a seminar estate attorney. But I think there's a lot of people that also, we know that you can do a lot of wills and estate documents right through the internet now. And that might be somewhat effective if you have a very simple life. So when you get to the specific question of trust versus will, it's really nuanced, because it depends upon which state you live in, and is it a good state to live in, or die in, I should say, or is it a bad state to die in? Because there are some differences. Explain what I'm talking about,
and I think perhaps a quick definition might make sense. So wills and trusts are not synonymous. Those are two different things. The will explains your wishes at the end of life. What you want to happen to your assets, who do you want to be the people that make decisions on your behalf. A trust is a little bit different. It is a vehicle that you use to carry out the wishes that are laid out in your will. So in our opinion, it's not an either or, should I have a will or should I have a trust? Most people, nay I say everyone, should have a will in some form, like you said, either a very simple handwritten will or an online will or a will that an attorney drafted up. The question becomes, when do trusts make sense to be part of your last will and testament? And that's exactly what you were saying.
And sometimes they even come into play because, I think about a lot of the revocable trusts that you see. It's not uncommon, especially in states that have complex or expensive probate processes. You will see people put a lot of their assets while they're still alive in revocable trust. And what's the benefits of that is that if you become incapacitated, or you need to have, your family needs to have access to money while you're still alive, but you can't make decisions on yourself, there's a mechanism for family members to jump in, help out. It also allows you to pass assets without going through a cumbersome probate process. So all those things. But as you can tell, we could go, and we've only really scratched the surface of all the different things that go into this. I would tell you, if you're starting to get to the point where you're worried about who's going to work for, help me out with financial decisions if I couldn't talk for myself, which medical treatments do I want upon myself, these are all more complex things, meaning you've probably reached a level of complexity that using the online boilerplate no longer is good for you, because you need to have open conversations with somebody who lives in your state or specializes in your state that can help walk you through the pluses and minuses, and that's going to be a good estate attorney. And that's probably, I hate to always answer a question with either homework or with another question, but I do want to give you guys just enough information so you at least can start the conversation and realizing, should you go find an attorney in your area to kind of be there, because the attorney, having an actual person, will help you not only once you're no longer here, you'll have somebody that can be held accountable or at least help ensure your wishes are fulfilled, versus sometimes with the boilerplate stuff, it's great when you're younger and you're just trying to make sure the kids end up in a good place or have a guardian set up. It might not be nuanced or complex enough to cover your true wishes.
Love it. Yeah, you know what I love about being the guy that gets to pick what questions we answer?
Oh, goodness.
I get to ask questions. I get to choose questions that I like. So this one is going to be an investing question because, that's kind of what I like. And this is from Vec. He says, hey, is now a good time to move funds from bonds to equity? Now, I can't imagine why he's asking that question right now. I can't imagine what's going on that would make somebody ask the question, hey, should I be moving my money from one side of my portfolio to the other?
Volatility is definitely one of those things where people start trying to, we all get somewhat cute with the markets. And look, I'm not saying you can't be opportunistic, that if you're on a dollar cost averaging plan and you're supposed to place your trades on the 15th of the month, but things have gotten beaten up in the last week, so you accelerate it, no problem with that whatsoever. But when you get to the issues, and I'll let you flex here in a minute, Mr. CFA, but
we all know how I love flexing.
I want to throw out there that the thing I think is the bigger question here is, what is the appropriate mix of risk assets versus conservative assets based upon your age, your risk profile, your goals, And, I mean, there's so many things that go into it that it's very nuanced, but I know that you still probably can shed some light on some things that people should navigate through.
No, I was going to say the exact same thing. When we think about portfolio design and portfolio construction for clients, our ultimate goal is not to go out there and beat some market or beat some index or have some level of performance. Our goal is to design a portfolio that helps our clients ultimately meet their long-term goals. Sure. So what that means is before volatility strikes, the portfolio is probably good.
Yeah.
During volatility, if the risk was right, the portfolio should still be good. And then after the volatility, the portfolio should still be good. We don't believe that someone going into a volatile period that's a 60-40 should go through that volatile period and at some point turn into an 80-20 after. That's just not the way that portfolio design and construction works. Now, what you can do is when the market delivers opportunities for you through volatility, whether that be, like you said, increasing dollar cost averaging or perhaps looking at loss harvesting inside of taxable accounts, or just going through a rebalance that maybe you haven't been able to do previously, the market can provide those opportunities, but I would be very, very careful adjusting your investment strategy because that begins to teeter on the line of frankly trying to time the market. Even with what we've seen over the past week with this volatility, no one knows, is this the beginning? Is this the end? And whenever we don't know something for sure, we try to always err on the side of probability. And the high probability is a well-constructed portfolio now should weather that storm, so we shouldn't have to make adjustments through the storm.
And I'll add that I don't mind us sharing. I went ahead and funded my HSA for the year.
Sure.
I've already funded my IRAs for the year, and then we made our profit-sharing contribution for 2019 already. Right. So there's nothing wrong with if you look at volatility, because volatility is actually your friend of the long-term investor. There's nothing wrong with going ahead if you look that we're down 15, 16% or whatever the number is, and you go, you know what? Throughout the year, because I know that throughout the year, from the high of the year to the low of the year, there's averaging around a 14% intra-year volatility from the highs to lows. This probably wouldn't be a bad time to go ahead and get those annual savings that I know are happening every year. They're systematic. Go ahead and looking at that. But at the end of the day, it needs to be part of your plan. This is not one of those things. I have no problem with you coloring around outside of the edges of things you were already naturally going to do and letting your behavior be impacted by the volatility to find opportunity. But don't go out there and get yourself in a pickle of a situation. I'm always amazed. I have received some phone calls from people. I actually had a family friend reach out to me and said, hey, the market's gotten beaten up. Is this a good time? And this is a gentleman who's well into past his 60s. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, when do you need this money again? And he said, oh, in 6 months. And I said, no way, no how. Stay the heck away. I don't care how cheap the market is. If you need the money in 6 months, you just don't know where you are in this intra-year volatility. Remember, every dollar you put into financial investments, especially risk assets like equity markets, you have to be willing to walk away from 5 to 7 years. That way, when Bo and I fund our IRAs, at the first time the market is down 6% because of this health scare, we're not upset that it's continued to lose, is because we know in the long term, that 5 to 7 years, that investment's going to make money too. That's right. So it's okay, and it keeps you from getting into this psychological madness that people are trying to get in on the dead perfect day, when that's just not how investing works.
So I want to ask a question inside a question, because this one came in, and you hit on this for a second, but I think we should expand upon it. The Vital Lover said, hey, where would you recommend investing to grow a down payment for a house? And I think you started to teeter on that. If I'm trying to save up for the down payment on a house, where should I invest that money to go be able to earn something? Well, if you just heard what Brian said, if you need that money inside the next couple of years, you should not be investing it. You do not want to put any assets at risk that you might need in the next 4 or 5 years. So if you're saving for a down payment that's further than 5 or 6 years out, then investing in a diversified portfolio across a diversified basket of goods would be great. If it's inside of the next 4 to 5 years that you're going to buy a house, don't invest it.
Yeah, it's more of saving for the down payment versus investing for the down payment. So you're going to do a cash equivalent. Yes, I know it's not going to offer you the maximum opportunity, but liquidity requires it, the money be there when you need it. You don't want to have a shock and awe where you made a bad situation even worse by using money you were counting on within that short period of time.
Love it. All right, so we'll step away from investing. We'll talk about personal finance for a second. I know you guys have the 23-8, this is from LD. I know you guys have the 23-8 guideline for purchasing a car with a loan, but what if you're buying with cash? Is there a framework for determining how much car is too much? I think this is actually a great question.
Well, I mean, my knee-jerk reaction to that is you got to respect the FOO. We talk about the financial order of operations. I mean, if you are getting in a situation where, yes, 23-8 is to help people in that messy middle of life when they're working through, they need reliable transportation, so they might have to finance the purchase, not on a luxury brand, but just on a reliable car, because luxury brand is same as cash, essentially, meaning it's paid off within a year. So this question is that, can I start buying luxury cars? Can I start buying nicer vehicles?
And how much is too much?
And how much is too much? And I will tell you that it's really a personal decision, but it's a personal decision that is guided by the financial order of operations, meaning that if you've done all the right things, meaning you have cash reserves, you're getting your employer match, you're reaching 20 to 25% savings rates, and you find that your debt is under control and yet you still have extra money, that's a personal decision to you that I'm going to give you the freedom that you have to decide how do you want to navigate life.
Exactly right.
And look, I had this, I will go ahead, I don't mind being confessional. Before I bought the Tesla, I was completely through a lot of the financial order of operations, but to me internally, I asked myself, am I generous enough to the community, to the church? And I'm not putting this on you guys. This is something we all internalize. Because I do get comments on YouTube where people say I'm successful, but I feel guilty, for having all this come to you. I think the way you can offset some of that is are you part of that? Remember, the happiness that creates fulfillment with money is also that you feel like you're part of doing something better. Mm-hmm. I felt like I had to get the giving part of my life right before I felt free enough to go enjoy a luxury like owning a Tesla. And I know that like I don't know if that's going to invite troll comments or what, but I do think I would be unfair if I wasn't transparent with you guys, because these are the checklists you're going to have to go through in your head. Not only do you go through the financial order of operations that the Money Guy Show talks about, but you also ask yourself, what does this purchase say about me? Yep. And I think that once you get all those things lined up, you will find that there is fulfillment in living the life that maximizes all the things that are important to you.
I think that's well said. Okay, so let's ask another investing question again, because I get to choose. This is from Tim. Tim says, what percentage of my total investments should I limit to investing in individual stocks versus index funds? Now, he didn't ask this next part, but I'm going to say ... and why.
First of all, I get excited because what do we have going on today, Bo, is we have two shows we're recording. Yep. After we do this Q&A. We're doing our annual Warren Buffett show, and then we're also doing a show on index investing. Yep. And one of the things that I think is so interesting about when you're trying to figure out, am I trying to beat the market, by doing individual stocks, or am I just doing the market in general? I will tell you, this is where you have to not outsmart yourself and get cute. And where does wisdom come from? A lot of times wisdom for me comes from experience. Uh-huh. And by the way, sitting next to a guy who's a CFA, one of the worst things that happened when he was getting his CFA is that we had just enough knowledge to make us straight up dangerous. Is that you find yourself, especially when we have volatility like this, you'll say, well, why not go buy this individual stock? Why not go do this? The problem is, what are the biggest problems and why is Dave Ramsey so successful is 80% of the mistakes are behavioral problems. So you're trying to create a plan of action, a financial plan that insulates you from the behavioral limitations of the human mind to be successful financially. And one of the best things you can do to take the emotions out of it, quit buying individual stocks. Because here's the problem with individual stocks. Yes, there's boom opportunities. But more than likely, even if you hit it right, it's just like the financial porn that's out there on Amazon. You see every time Amazon reaches an all-time high, you'll see some type of thing that comes out there that says if you put $1,000 on Amazon on this day, you have $2 million later.
Right.
And everybody, but what nobody ever tells you, and the reason this doesn't happen is that after you make the investment, if you nailed it, and after it goes up 2 to 3, 400%, you're probably going to sell it because you're so excited you made 2 to 3 to 400%. And then you're going to agonize for the next 10 years that you missed your chance at riches because of this. I have somebody who comes up to me at every neighborhood event and tells me they missed the penny stock opportunity. They owned it and it turned into Monster energy drink and it could have made them mega wealthy. It eats him. You can see this. And I see that with people. So there's an emotional thing there. And then the opposite happens. I can tell you from my own experience, I bought Apple stock in 2008 when it was getting crushed. And the thing is that while I was on that, I sold it, by the way, after it had gone up 2 to 300%. So I still kick myself about that. But the other problem is while you're on that walk up the mountain with the yo-yo, meaning the stock price is going up and down, even though this Apple stock was such a small percentage of my total net worth and investable assets, I would go home depressed based upon how Apple stock behaved that day. So the emotional reactions are legit. You find yourself jaded. So how do you prevent yourself from getting into that? Buy the indexes. Be part of innovation. Be part of technology and the ever-expanding pizza pie of success of our global economy.
Agree. However, sometimes it's unavoidable, right? So sometimes we're going to have individual stocks, whether it be something that we were gifted or we inherited and we can't get rid of it because of embedded gains, or perhaps we worked at an employer where we get RSUs and ESPPs. What's the appropriate way to think about if I am going to have individual stock exposure and it's unavoidable? Or perhaps you're someone who just feels very convicted about a specific company. You know, I love Tesla. I want to own Tesla shares and I'm a lifetime holder. I don't know anybody like that, but I'm just going to say if you were someone like that.
I do own. I will tell you the only individual stock I own is Tesla.
If you're someone who falls into that camp, how do you figure out the appropriate level to own? We think a really good rule of thumb is you never want to have more than 5% of your total investable portfolio in any individual company, especially if that is also a company where your human capital is tied. So if it's the employer for whom you work and you have all your ESPP shares and all of your options and all of your RSUs and your 401k, you have way more risk than you might realize. So you really need to think about, how do I think about diversifying some of that risk? Because you say this all the time, Brian, when bad things happen, they don't just happen in isolation. Economy goes down, maybe your job is at risk, and then your financial portfolio is at risk. You just might not want to put yourself in that position. So a really good, healthy rule of thumb, 5% of your investable net worth should not be more than one concentrated holding.
So I feel
concentrated stock holding.
I feel like, Bo, that we went to a college campus. I carried my own little soapbox.
I was going to tell you to step on it.
I set it down in the middle of the college square. I stood on it with the megaphone, yelled at everybody on how you're doomed if you do it this way. And then you walked up, you tugged on my jacket, and you said, "Sir, there's actually a better way to do this." And you explained that, look, yes, employee stock purchase plans, especially if they have like a 15% discount, there ought to be a process that you're maximizing these things. So I lowered my head, handed you my megaphone, and then got off the soapbox, because I do think that is very valid, and I appreciate you bringing me down. Because, look, I just don't want you guys to make the mistakes that I have made in the past, and I've seen clients make. I've seen others, and I've seen the regret and dread. But you are right. There are times where it actually does fit into a good financial plan, and you just have to have all things lead to have you check the box on creating an analytical plan of action so that you can control the emotions, but also know it fits into your long-term financial life.
Love it. All right, so here's one from, this is from Ira, or IRA, if that's how you say her first name. I'm guessing it's Ira, though. This one is awesome, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. 'Cause I actually, normally I know how you're going to answer these. I don't know how you're going to answer this question, so this should be fun. Should you factor in HSA contributions into the 20 to 25% retirement savings? I hear you guys talk all the time, save 20, 25%.
Right.
Should I include my HSA contributions?
It depends on how you're using the HSA, because, and I'm hoping you remember the stat, because I don't have it in front of me. This is the only problem with Q&As, is that I remember things, but I can't give you the actual stat, so maybe you'll remember, is there are 3 different ways that you can use HSA money. And the majority, the lion's share, that's the percentage I can't remember, is that what percentage of people actually invest in long-term assets when they're HSA?
Only 4%.
That's the number. So I have 5 digits on this hand. I should have remembered it's only going to take 4 of them. So there are 4% of people that are not using HSAs as essentially clearing accounts, meaning you put the money in, you take the tax deduction, and then you're paying medical bills. That's how the majority of people are doing, because we love HSAs. They are triple tax advantage, meaning that you get not only a tax deduction off your income taxes, that's great. Not only do the assets grow tax deferred while they're invested, but number 3, if you use them for qualified health expenses or medical expenses, it is completely, those withdrawals are tax-free. So that's triple tax advantage. Unfortunately, most people, 96% of people, are only taking advantage of one of the 3 triple tax advantages, meaning they're taking the tax deduction on the front end. So if you're part of the 4% that is actually letting the money grow tax deferred, and then counting on and keeping track of your receipts and expenses, letting the money work, and then down the road being able to pull that money out tax-free, I think, yes, you can count that towards the 20 to 25%.
I love it. Now, again, I'm going to throw one small caveat on there, because we always believe that operating in a conservative manner makes the most sense. Yeah. And when people ask us all the time, hey, what do you consider 529 assets, or what do you consider HSA assets? We always have the same answer. We consider those to be pre-funded future expenses. So it's going to pay for some expense that we're going to incur in the future, whether it be for college or for medical bills. As such, I personally exclude my HSA contributions from my savings rate. So I'm trying to hit my 25% without factoring in college savings, without factoring in HSA. What does that practically mean? It just means that my savings rate is actually higher than 25%. It's okay if you want to err on that conservative side. That's the way that I look at it. But again, if you're someone who's using those dollars for long term, absolutely count it. You get a pass from the money guy show.
Well, and that leads to, I think it's interesting, 529 assets typically are not for your benefit. They are for the kids or a loved one of some sort. So I completely agree. I do think HSAs are kind of unique in the fact that once you're 65, you can use, if you've done an incredible job of accumulating assets in an HSA, you can use HSA assets as another retirement account. Now, you will pay taxes on the gains, but, hopefully you've been tracking the expenses, and you can let a lot of that compounding growth be completely tax-free by just having an organized plan. So go watch our show on HSAs, and you'll understand that strategy.
Here's one, and this one is a little controversial. Not really controversial. It's controversial in our world, not really controversial in general. This from Richard. Hey, can Social Security be included as part of your net worth statement or as part of your net worth? I've heard it both ways. I'm 69 and retired.
Oh, man. It's
a good one, right?
We get, because I feel bad sometimes on YouTube comments, especially from our military audience, because you guys are asking, how do I factor in pensions? How do I factor in Social Security? Sure. And you've kind of, on one of our previous answers, alluded to this, so I kind of think this is a great one. Man, this is a mega question to answer. Because it's not going to upset, but it's definitely going to give people a little bit of heartburn, is that the first thing, let me give you the bad news, and I'll give you the good news. The bad news is promises of future payments are not really net worth items. Because what do promises of future payments do is that they help offset your living expenses in retirement. So you can take the benefit, meaning that you can have a correlation to how much money you need to save for the future. If you take into account on your calculation, you take what you need in retirement, back out Social Security income, back out pension income, the net result you can then gross up to see if your assets can cover those annual needs. Now so a lot of people are going to be upset about that, because you're going to know that your teacher's pension or your military pension or your future Social Security might be one of the most valuable cash flow things that you're going to have coming towards you. There was just a comment on YouTube that says, I know somebody who has less than $300,000. They have a great retirement. What are you guys talking about? Because their house is paid for, their living expenses are low, and he is probably spot on. But I'm telling you, that is the way that works, is because the person he's talking about does own their life, and they have a very small footprint of their expense need, so it's covered by Social Security. Now, those of you who work for a company that has a pension that has a rollover option, meaning a lump sum option, I will tell people that while you are getting statements that say the lump sum value of this is worth this, you can put that on your net worth statement, because I think that pension has the potential that you have a choice before retirement that you can roll it out, or you can just take the pension amount that they're offering. But just know this, and by the way, it doesn't mean you always should take the lump sum. You better measure twice, cut once, understand what's going on, because every pension is different in that aspect. But as soon as you annuitize it and turn that lump sum into a string of payments that ends at your life or your spouse's life, if you have a survivor benefit,
comes off the statement.
Comes off the net worth statement, because now it's a promise of future payments. It's no longer an asset that you get to count.
Love it.
Did I give too much bad news and not offset it with enough good news?
It was great. It's an income statement item, not a balance sheet item. That's for all you accountants out there.
Man, I should have thrown in a few accounting terms in there.
I'll do what I can. All right, here, let me do another. This is from Jared. Hey, if you have a Roth 401k option, and he's talking about with the 401k. So in a 401k, you can either do pre-tax contributions or it can do Roth contributions. You can also do after-tax contributions, but that's a different thing. He says, should you max that out before your Roth IRA? So if you have a Roth 401k option, should you max it out before your Roth? And here's the thing that popped to my mind immediately. You should go back to FOO. If you haven't checked your FOO, check your FOO. Because what do we always say when it comes to saving for retirement? One of the early steps to saving is, if your employer offers a match, you want to make sure you go get the match, because that is just free money. It's crazy not to do that. Well, after you do that, we then do recommend going to max out a Roth IRA or potentially an HSA. Why do we say that? Two real reasons. One is, generally speaking, inside of a Roth IRA, you have more investment options inside of the IRA than you would have inside of the 401k. 401ks are generally limited to the 20 or 30 investment options inside the plan. So you have access to the entire investment universe should you need it. Here's the other thing that's a little unique. When you contribute to a Roth IRA, if something were to happen and things were to get bad, you do have access to your basis inside of the Roth IRA. Now, you should never take advantage of that. You should never go get it. You should never use it. But building assets in there does provide a unique safety net that is likely not available there if you're putting it into the Roth 401k. In our opinion, you should do both, though. Go max out that Roth IRA, then double back to the 401k, go max that bad boy out too.
And don't forget, we always say if you're trying to figure out if you're traditional, meaning tax deductible when you make the contribution, or Roth, which you don't get a deduction now, but it grows tax-free, it's really dependent upon your tax rate.
That's right.
And we think that, or truthfully, you could even add up and do effective tax rate. Don't even just look at the marginal rate. Well, I mean, it is marginal. Add your marginal rate plus your state income tax.
Yep.
If you're under 25%, because we think historically that's probably going to age well, is that that's a low tax rate, consider doing the Roth. If you're 25 to 30, you're kind of in the gray zone. You have to know your personal situation, what's coming up financially. That one is, we're not going to tell you either way. And then if your income, your effective rate, if you add the federal and the state together, your marginal together and the state, you're going to end up over 30%. You probably want the tax deduction.
Love it. You like doing 401k questions? You want another one?
It sounds like you have one.
All right, I thought you'd never ask. Let me give you another. This is from Susan. She said, hey, should someone contribute to an employer 401k even if their company does not offer a match?
It really, here's the thing. I'm going to go back once again, respect the FOO. Financial order of operations is that there could still, even if there's not a match, there could be a tremendous tax benefit long term. Because remember, a lot of the research shows that millionaires, their biggest asset that drives them into reaching that seven-figure status is their employer retirement plan. Now, I recognize a lot of that does help when your employer is giving you 6%, 8%, even 4%, something that's an effective match. But that doesn't mean that compounding interest, deferred taxing, or even tax-free growth within a Roth is very valuable and something that even if you have a no match, because you see a lot of teachers, they get pensions and they have 403Bs that don't offer a match. I think that there is something you should look at when you're trying to figure out how do you save for the long term your 20 to 25%. But you do need to pay attention to, and I hate to keep throwing out facets of things you need to pay attention to, but if there's not a match, what else is wrong with this plan? Is like, Is this going to be an insurance-based retirement plan that has, says it has Vanguard, but actually has a lot of expensive sub-account fees, has a lot of horrible investments, doesn't offer a lot of diversification. All these things will come into play, the expenses, the cost, as well as the choices within for the investments. So can you be diversified? All that will come into play on your decision-making process. But yes, I will answer in a general sense that I think as long as you're respecting the financial order of operations, respecting the FOO, there is a place for even a retirement plan that doesn't offer a match.
I agree. I have nothing to add to that. I literally have nothing to add to that. All right. This is from Husky's ATL. He says, hey, what's Bo's Starbucks order? Grande Blonde Americano. I just figured the people want to know the answers. I'm going to give them the answers. All right. All right. So this one's from Tim. This is a great one. This says, because we've talked about this ad nauseum, and I think this is where we are a little bit unique. Hey, Money Guy Show, how important is a 20% down payment on a house?
Oh yeah, and this is Tim that asked this question.
Tim.
So Tim, I mean, we have been very transparent and confessional on this. Is that I went around and interviewed our entire staff to find out how many of them on their first home purchase actually put down 20%, because I feel like there's so much pressure out there in the financial world, especially with the financial talking heads, that everybody's like, put down 20%. And you kind of feel shamed a little bit if you're in your 20s and even early 30s or even mid 30s, and especially if you're in a high cost of living area. We came from South Atlanta where houses cost a nickel, and then we moved to Nashville, which is booming, and you realize that I can't even imagine San Francisco or somewhere out there in California or even in New York. They're hearing this and they're like, 20%, we can't do this on the coastal cities. And I wanted to express that my first house, I put down 5%. And because I also had this conversation with one of our employees that he was considering an upgrade on his house. He was going to sell his starter home, go move into an apartment, and then save. And I was like, you realize houses are appreciating so fast here in Nashville that if you look at and just assume a conservative, even though if you look at the last 4 to 5 years of what's going on here in Nashville, even if you put 3% because of the leverage growth factor, you can't save enough money to offset what the house would have appreciated in. So he changed, making a horrible decision because I don't think he had thought through the whole process. So I will tell you the same thing. I think first houses, I'm going to give you the flexibility to put down less than 20% as long as you're respecting that you better not be exceeding 25% of your income, because you don't want to be house rich, life poor. Right. But I will tell you, this is an increasing requirement upon you, because as you get older and you're in that good house, but maybe the house is starting to feel a little bit smaller on you, the walls are closing in because you got a growing family. I do anticipate that as you move up to the next house, that you start showing a little more financial responsibility. And I don't mind sharing my own. I'm on my third home now. First house, I put down 5%. Yep. Second house, I put down, I think it was somewhere between 10 to 15%. Third house, I put down the full 20%. And it was it shows my walk towards financial stability. And I get it. I'm trying to always create rules that take real life into account, because I know while you're in your 30s, things are messy. I didn't feel like I actually had reached some level of financial comfort until I was in my 40s, because there are so many things that are going on. I mean, between you're walking towards a successful life, is you're trying to navigate your career, you're trying to start savings habits, you're also thinking about when do you build a family, when do you buy a house. All these things create a lot of stress that we try to create in our plans. The freedom so that you can actually navigate without artificially shaming you with rules that most people are not even effectively doing.
I love it. All right, we're gonna end this. We're gonna do one more, right, Reeves? Well, yeah, okay. She's saying 0 more, but I'm giving you guys one more. And this is, I think, a good one to end on, because this is kind of this is exciting sort of. This is from Kearns. Now he pokes fun at me. I'll own
Don't
it.
we all?
He says, "Hey Bo, at what point did your wife stop cutting your hair? My fiance tells me it's time that I go to a real barber, but I can't imagine spending that money on something we can do ourselves." I'm going to reframe his question to make it a little more useful, not just my fashion sense, but actually, when is it okay to start spending money on things, and how do you find solace in spending money on things that perhaps you could do yourself? Whether that be lawn maintenance or house cleaning or hair cutting or fill in the blank?
Well, I think it would be wrong for me to start this answer when self-reflective, you have received haircuts from your spouse.
I did. There was a period in time where it just seemed a whole lot easier for my wife to just cut my hair. I had a pretty easy haircut. I think what happened is we started doing a YouTube channel, and I had to have all this.
No, seriously though, in all seriousness, because let's face it, I've had the same hairdo since the 3rd grade. You know, the only exception, the 6th or 7th grade, I might have had a little side spike.
Sure.
You know, to kick it up a notch, so that I wasn't just all business. You know, in the 6th and 7th grade. But this has been the same. But do share with them, when did you feel like it was okay? And then you can even expand upon that to the same things beyond haircuts like landscaping.
Yeah, the big thing for me is once my savings got to the point to where I realized, hey, it's okay to splurge a little bit and spend on some of these other things. And I'm not suggesting that a haircut is a splurge. I just did that because it was easy. But it wasn't a professional haircut. My wife's not a barber. And I said, you know what? If I'm maxing out my Roth IRA, if I'm putting money in my 401k, if I'm doing the HSA, and I'm hitting my 20-25% number, it's okay for me to do the things like go see a professional barber and have a professional haircut. You know, now I have a lady I've been working with for years and years now, and I love it. It's just kind of part of my routine, part of my thing. I think if you know that you're checking the boxes, you then have to start asking your question, what is my goal? What are the things that I ultimately want money to be able to do for me? Because we know that money does not buy happiness. Having money is not the goal itself. It's just a resource. Well, if one of the things you're able to do is you're able to save for the future and build financial independence and build wealth, but you also have some excess in there where perhaps you don't have to like scrub your own toilets and you place a lot of value in not scrubbing your own toilets or not cutting your own hair or not hemming your own clothes or whatever that thing is for you, it's okay to recognize that it's okay to spend money on those things. You know, another thing, my wife and I, we used to not go out to eat a ton because we just kind of saw that as like a waste of money. We recognize as life progressed, as we made wise financial decisions, it's okay for us to do those things because part of the journey to wealth and the journey to financial independence is actually getting to enjoy the journey. It's not all about deferred gratification is about deferring a little bit of today for a lot of tomorrow, not all of today for a tomorrow that may not even come.
Well, and it's also one of those things where I think this is why I love respecting the financial order of operations is that it allows you to, because we hear about the latte factor. Mm-hmm. We've already had somebody ask you what you were drinking from Starbucks because we know people get on to you. But I think as long as you're paying yourself first and you have a plan of action, it does give you the margin, the excess, to where you choose what is important to you. Because I can go ahead and tell you, I was a tightwad about some things in my life. Like I've only in the last year given up cutting my grass.
Sure.
I love still cutting grass, but cathartic. I realized that I was spending my weekends cutting grass more than building memories with the family, so the value of my time took precedent. But there's other parts of things like cleaning, the house cleaning. When my wife and I first got married, some of our first fights in that awkward 2 years where we're getting used to each other is who's going to scrub the toilets? Oh. And neither one of us are naturally cleaners or organized. I don't want you people to think that you come to my house and it's an episode of Hoarders, but it is one of those things that's nice having somebody come in every 2 weeks because it makes us organize and clean for the person that's coming to clean the house. And it took away all the strife between my wife and I trying to figure out who's going to scrub those awkward rings that form in the commode. So it's one of those things. So you have to, every relationship's different. The biggest thing is what Bo hit upon. Don't neglect your financial life. Make it a plan of action to where you're checking the boxes on your financial order of operations so that you are not neglecting where every dollar needs to go, so that it creates enough margin that, you can go do the things with, after you save the 20 to 25%, go travel, go create memories, but also go create a better version of what your house could be like so you can focus on relationships and spending time with the family. Nothing wrong with that as long as you're putting the effort in and doing it responsibly.
If you're someone who's brand new to the show, you just happen to stumble upon us, make sure you go check out our channel. We have tomes of information out there where you can go learn everything you want to know about personal finance. If you want to go to our website, you can go to moneyguide.com. You can check out all of our archives there as well. We actually have a resource page where if you want a deliverable that you can download, that you can share with friends, that you can give to family, that you can use for your own wealth building journey, go to themoneyguy.com, click on resources. And if you're someone out there watching on YouTube right now and you've not subscribed, we would love for you to subscribe to the channel, keep up with what we're doing, ring the bell so that you can get notifications and know everything that's going on in the Money Guy world.
Remember, the goal is 100,000 by the end of the year. We're quickly walking towards that. Not going to be able to do it unless you go tell a few friends and family about us. And then the last thing, a lot of you, because you said if you're new to this, we know we have thousands of people show up. We know we answer thousands of questions each month. That blows my mind when we went through the analytics of it. And so I know we're doing a lot of good out there in the financial world. And y'all are like, how can these guys just give it away? What's the catch here? We call this the abundance cycle, meaning we want you to come, learn, apply, grow. Since we've been doing this since 2006, we've planted enough seeds out there in the garden of financial opportunity that people are now reaching levels of success that our cup is filling up and pouring over with people who are so successful they need to take the relationship to the next level. And we call that the abundance cycle, is that once you need some help, you'll hopefully remember who was planting the seed. What I love about this is that we just give it away. There's no catch, with the fact that just the goodwill that's built up, that you're going to pay us back with the relationship in the future. So thank you for tuning in. We'll be back with more episodes. We're always creating content. We love what we do for a living, and that passion hopefully bleeds through over to the content we create for you in the Money Guy family.